outside of the school. It appears it was closer to 6. Joining us now, Tom Homan, former acting ICE director and former NYPD officer. He's also a Fox News contributor. A lot of questions here, Tom, but the optimal question here is this. At 12:16, a call comes in that there are 8 to 9 students who are alive. We know just 1 minute prior to that, the 3 shields had arrived, BORTAC had arrived, but that door was not breached until 12:50 p.m. Your thoughts?
Well, first, I think when you go back to the beginning, right? So when he went into the school, within several minutes, couple minutes, officers went into that school and they engaged him. So they took what they believed to be an active, mobile, active shooter and contained him. And a couple of those officers got shot. They didn't retreat, as I hear some news media said. They took cover and they kept him contained, which is the first thing you do in an active shooter. Rather than having him mobile and having access to the entire school, now they got him contained to one room. Now that's certainly not good for the people in that one room, but for the majority of the school, you know, now this shooter doesn't have access. The officers maintained him and kept him in containment, which I think was a good sign, right? And we got to remember, I don't agree with everything Director McGraw said about, you know, everybody's a Monday morning quarterback this thing, but remember, even when the tactical team made entrance, these are guys with the right equipment, the right training, extensive training, some of the most extensive training law enforcement has. And even when they go in the door, they got to find the shooter. Now, where are the children? Where's the shooters? The shooter using children as a shield. When they go into the door, they got to find the shooter before they can even fire their weapon. And while they're looking for that shooter, what happens? They get shot. So even with the most advanced tactical equipment, the most tactical training, these officers still have to locate the shooter within that room and take him out while they're taking rounds. And that was a tactical unit well trained. So when people question why didn't the police knock down the door earlier, you've heard the term funnel of death. They don't have any of that equipment. They don't have any of that training. So it puts them at great risk. I'm not Monday morning quarterback. I'm just saying there's a lot of cops here that did a lot of the right things and overall saved a lot of lives. But there's going to be lessons learned. Like McGraw said, the investigation isn't over with yet. Having a timeline is a good thing to have. But they got to still talk to a lot of people. What were you doing at this time? What kind of do you have any visibility on the bad guy at that time? So there's a lot of more questions that need to be answered. But the conference was troubling to me. I think there's going to be lessons learned. I think there's going to be some mistakes that were made. But, you know, until the investigation's over, I think we're jumping to the gun. I mean, some of these reporters, the way they're finding these, you know, questions at the McGraw, I think is a little unfair. But I'll say this, look, my heart bleeds for the parents. My heart bleeds for the families. I can't even imagine what they're going through, and they need to be front and center on this. But let's remember, the law enforcement officers also who've seen this and didn't engage the gunmen, who were injured. I've been involved, you know, I've been involved in one shooting, but I've seen a lot of tragedy in my career too. These officers are never going to be the same. I guarantee most of these officers haven't slept since
sure.
And some of these officers are going to need to get some help. So I can guarantee every one of these officers, including the tactical officers, are questioning themselves every minute of every day, not sleeping, and remembering the carnage that they'll never forget. So these are victims too, but I think we got to wait till the investigation's completely over and start until we, you know, before we start throwing officers under the bus. The officers aren't the bad guys. The shooter's the bad guy.
Absolutely. And one of those officers who responded, let's not forget, he lost his own child as he was responding to the scene. Tom, you underscore a key point. There needs to be an investigation. A lot of facts have changed. We are just 72 hours into this. We thought that there was a independent school district officer outside. Turned out not to be true. At first, we were told that BORTAC agents stormed alone. We now know that not to be true. We were told for 12 minutes there was a shooter firing outside. In fact, it was more like 6. My point is this information is changing. We are 72 hours into this. But Tom, the key question is, as those 911 calls are funneling in from teachers, from students, and that 12:16 p.m. one where we are told there were students alive, how quickly would that 911 information be getting to the responding commander who thought, in the words of the director, that in fact there were no children in there to be harmed? How quickly would that information be getting to him?
And that's what we don't know. And Kaylee, that's the question. That's the question that needs to be answered. Did the incident commander get up-to-date information, minute by minute, what's going on? Because that might have changed his response, his decision on this. Do we breach? Do we do tactical breach or not? Do we go into the proper equipment and not to save children? I think that you just hit the number one question we need to answer. Was he getting up-to-date responses immediately about what was going on in that classroom? That's going to lead us to a lot of answers and hopefully to what needs to be addressed in the future and lessons learned. But you hit it. That's the key, and that's a question I was thinking during the conference. Get to that question, to have answer that question. I think that is the key to this whole thing.
Another question, Tom, the school district, this school in particular, that a teacher propped open a door to a school. We know at most schools the doors remain locked, and that when this teacher saw this crash, perhaps she panicked, he or she, but ran back to that door, and that door remained open. Not to mention, where was the independent school district officer?
That one mistake, I'm sure she'll live with the rest of her life. I'm sure she never thought that would happen, but you're right. Something that simple could have prevented a lot of people from being killed. So that's, I don't want to say
Tom, let me get to this.
It was huge.
We only have a minute or so, and I really want to get to this because this was a key point, is the digital footprint of this individual. We know 60% of shooters communicate their intent beforehand. In many ways, he was no exception. There were at least 3 group chats that we learned of with 4 individuals. In one case, many days before, there was discussion about this individual being a school shooter. I don't know if it was in jest. I don't know if it was serious. The bottom line is, one of those 3 people in that chat, if they would have told authorities, something could have been very different here.
Look, there needs to be a whole congressional investigation on social media, right? These are multi-billion-dollar companies who have a lot of access. They certainly, the last couple of years, have been front-page stories about the elections and everything else going on. These social media companies need to step up their game. They're multi-billion companies. They need to come up with a system. We need to come up with a system where people that are on social media that are clearly a threat to the community can be brought to the attention of the police immediately. We're the richest nation on earth. We're the most, there's no reason this country can't get to that fix. With the companies that are out there like Facebook and all these other companies, we can fix this. We just need to address it. So I hope a congressional hearing happens out of this.